The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Well, some kind of opening week for football royalty. Arch Manning, the latest line in the first family of quarterbacking. Meh, in his debut against Ohio State. And last night, Bill Belichick, considered by some the greatest ever to coach the game of football, 6 Super Bowl championships. Oi, Gewalt. That was awful against TCU. They weren't playing Ohio State. It was TC freaking U. I know they played for the national championship a couple of years ago, but they were embarrassed in that and nowhere last year. And now what, Bill? You're 73 years old. You have put together what has been called the 33rd NFL team, and you stink. They were terrible last night. Yeah, the opening drive made everybody on the bandwagon jump right on. Oh, look at that. You know, they went right down the field. Bill Belichick, smarter than everybody else. They've mastered this, and he's going to be the greatest college. No. 41 straight unanswered points for TCU. In 511 NFL games, that would be both as a head coach and a coordinator, and I guess including playoffs as well, a Bill Belichick team had never given up 48 points in a game. In the one college game that he has coached so far, they gave up 48 points. There's a learning curve in this. I understand that. But he's 73 years old. And he's going to build this program that's going to mirror NFL teams. Well, let me tell you this, and this was staggering to me as I was watching the pregame show last night. And I don't remember who said it, but they looked at the roster of the team, and they said of this new roster that Belichick has put together, 70 new players on it. There are 2, count them 2, NFL prospects. And what did we hear about Belichick going to North Carolina? Oh, yeah. Anybody who wants to go to the NFL is going to want to play for Bill Belichick because he knows what it takes to be an NFL player. He's going to develop you for the league. And maybe he will for some of these guys, and maybe some who are not NFL prospects now will develop into NFL prospects. But how long is he going to stay to develop them? I mean, this from last night, and maybe it's an overreaction, but this has the possibility of being a complete Hindenburg. And among those who predicted this was Pablo Torre. And Pablo Torre did some really good reporting on the relationship between the girlfriend of Bill Belichick, the 24-year-old girlfriend, who, by the way, is the same age as his backup quarterback, Max Johnson, who is Brad Johnson's son. Brad Johnson was the quarterback for the Redskins for a couple of years. She's on the sidelines wearing these, very tight and sparkly bell-bottom jeans before the game, schmoozing it up with the boyfriend. You don't see coaches' wives down on the field with them before the game. You don't see girlfriends. Maybe there are some single coaches I'm not aware of, but I've never seen a girlfriend down there. This could be just an absolute mess. This could be as embarrassing as it gets for a legend. Now, they got Charlotte coming up. That's a team they can probably beat. But if this is what this looks like, Pat Forty from SI, you hear him a lot on the Tony Kornheiser show. He covered this game last night for SI.com, and he wrote about this debacle, this 48-14 game, starting over at age 73, diving into a radical roster makeover with 70 new players, competing at a talent deficit, working with younger players, trying to teach punters how to catch a snap and linebackers how to fill a running lane, and quarterbacks how not to turn the ball over for touchdowns. The first night of Bill's back-to-school adventure was bad, spectacularly bad, embarrassingly bad, stadium emptying bad. And boy, look who was there at the beginning of the game. Well, there's Lawrence Taylor. There's Michael Jordan. the greatest athlete ever to come out of North Carolina, the greatest NBA player of all time. There's Roy Williams, won national championships at North Carolina. Mia Hamm, the greatest soccer player ever, perhaps. Everybody's there. They're there for this coronation, and it was awful. It was just terrible. Things can turn around. You can make adjustments, but an odd-acting 73-year-old man with this strange relationship with the girlfriend who seems to be controlling his life. You saw the outtakes, or it wasn't even an outtake. It was included in the piece that CBS did about his book, where they asked him a question and she jumped from behind the camera and said, "Don't answer that." This woman, young enough to be his granddaughter. She's not the whole problem here. There are other issues as well, but this was such a bad look for something that had been hyped to the moon. With Arch Manning, okay, he was not horrendous. He wasn't very good, and they lost by only a touchdown. This is something else. And what Forty writes in his piece today, he says, after that overwhelming buildup, two huge storylines horribly flopped. As the saying goes, hope is not a strategy. And, here we are, second day of September, and it may feel a whole lot different on the second day of November, but this does not look good. Forty concludes his column today saying Belichick wasn't hired to simply sizzle, just steak. He's not a glib talker like Deion Sanders, but he's done his part in helping promote the program during the offseason, making appearances to speak to alums, signing on to a Hulu series documenting the season, and boy, could that thing now crater. Carolina enjoyed commensurate boosts in ticket sales and donor contributions, embracing the reality that even at a hoop school, football is too important not to go all in. Chapel Bill, as he calls him, and I think they've even trademarked that. He and the girlfriend have trademarked that. Chapel Bill fulfilled the first part of this arrangement. He brought people to Kenan Stadium, and he watched them leave before the game ended. TCU didn't have a ton of traveling fans, but most of what was left in the later half of the fourth quarter was wearing purple. The press conference, the post-game press conference, a lot like what you would get from him in New England, though a little bit more expansive. This was his opening statement after the debacle.
Fans had a tremendous energy all walk. And, we played competitively, but then just couldn't sustain it. So, obviously, we have a lot of work to do. We need to do a better job all the way around, coaching, playing, all three phases of the game. Just wasn't up to what it needs to be, and I know we're a lot better than that. So, we'll need to work on those things and show it on Saturday on a quick turnaround. But, give TCU credit. They came in and did a good job, and they were clearly the better team tonight. They deserved to win, and they did it decisively.
Oh, yes. 542 yards of total offense for TCU. 258 yards rushing, including a 75-yard run. Tackling, kind of optional.
You said it. We got to do a better job of tackling. There's no doubt about that. And so we're just going to have to work harder on it, tackle better. There's no secret to it. There's no pill you can take. You just got to, have to tackle better fundamentally and get more guys around the ball so we're not, so many tackles in space.
Wouldn't it be great if they had like a tackling pill, like Viagra? Here, take this pill and you'll be able to tackle. Sorting through the wreckage after the game, Scott Van Pelt and Kirk Herbstreit, who analyzed the game on ESPN last night. And by the way, the whole bandwagon jumping that went on before the game, I'll give Desmond Howard credit for this. Desmond Howard was the only one on the set of 6 to pick TCU. Now, I'll give Nick Saban a bit of a pass here because he and Belichick are great friends and they work together in Cleveland. So, he kind of said that, he was picking it out of loyalty. What you got from Pat McAfee, he got caught up in the hype of the moment and everybody, wigged out in the Carolina blue about this great start for the program. So he picked him, but it was ridiculous. This was not a competitive game, and SVP and Herbstreit took a look at it afterwards, sorting through what actually took place last night in Chapel Hill.
I hope and I think our viewers at home understand the build-up and the hype. It's Bill Belichick. He's coming to coach college football. Of course you're going to wonder and talk about what it might be. And this TCU team, look, we heard Sonny say they felt disrespected. They played that way tonight, didn't they? That Frog team played with an edge, and they played with the experience that they brought to town.
Exactly. I mentioned during the broadcast, because I was down on the field with him, that I talked to him with him throughout the week, getting ready for the broadcast. He didn't really bring up much about feeling a bit disrespected, but on the field as they were getting ready and minutes away from kickoff, I said, "How you guys feeling tonight?" He said, "We're very ready." He said, "We feel slighted, we feel disrespected," and I said what you just said, and he goes, "No, don't get me wrong. I have more respect than anybody for Bill Belichick, but no one's brought us up throughout this whole thing, and our players, feel it, and so we're anxious to go out and play this game." And the way it started, I mean, it looked great for Carolina, but TCU, as you mentioned, an experienced team, a veteran team that knows how to win football games. They won 9 a year ago, and I think they came into this game with a great deal of confidence. And now that this story is over, now it's about where TCU might be headed in the Big 12 this year, and North Carolina obviously has to kind of regroup after week 1.
I agree. And looking at that TCU schedule, which y'all showed, they've got some chances against teams like SMU and Arizona State fairly early in the season, playoff teams a year ago, to show that perhaps Sonny Dykes, who we know played for a title a few years ago, maybe they have the makings. It's very early, but TCU with an emphatic statement on a night where they felt slighted but made a loud statement. As for Carolina, look, optimism in the offseason, easiest thing in the world to sell. You bring a new coach to town, I don't care who it is. We're going to fly to the ball. We're going to play with tempo. We brought in all these new guys, and that's great. But the reality that we saw on tape tonight is that there appear to be some deficiencies on the lines of scrimmage in particular. What's Bill Belichick going to do? Because I get being a good coach, but you can't overcome what you don't have. What do they lack?
Well, they're going to have to continue to recruit and develop, obviously. But for the time being, what we saw, because no one knew with 70 new players what they really had. I mean, even trying to put our chart and our boards together, try to figure out who's on this team was somewhat challenging, until we got to the end of the first quarter. What do they have? They have a team right now that's got to get a lot better with the physicality at the line of scrimmage. They got to tackle better as a group. A lot of times they would run to the ball and pursue and be there and then just not finish the play, which will drive Bill Belichick and his son Steve, the defensive coordinator, crazy. I think Max Johnson, I don't know the injury to Gio. You don't know how serious that is, but when Max Johnson got in there, his experience at LSU and A&M really showed. I thought he was more decisive. He got the ball out. There just seemed to be a little bit of a flow and rhythm to the offense with him in there, so wouldn't be shocked if maybe he gets an opportunity here in the next game or two. And at the end of the day, they just got to continue to find pieces. And, in the film, when you're down 41-7, I bet there's some guys that were starters that maybe they didn't give quite 100%. Yeah. Maybe guys that came in off the bench did. So they're going to continue to tweak and try to get better. But I don't know about you, but this is a team that obviously has got a long way to go by the time they get into conference play to try to be a competitive team.
They do. Their schedule isn't as difficult as it could be given what we saw from the ACC. No. That they duck a lot of the teams that really made emphatic statements. And I want to close with that, Herbie. You mentioned it's been a 5-day feast for folks like us that love college ball. The statements that were made that you think were the loudest that will resonate beyond just early September. Who caught your eye that you're saying they really showed me a lot?
LSU would be the first one just because they have a defense to go with the quarterback, Garrett Nussmeier. They got pieces around Garrett. The other thing that I think stood out to me was his play on the road in that environment. That was a tough game for them. They played smart. He didn't turn the ball over, which at times was an issue for him last year. I think they're a real threat in the SEC and potentially for a national title. The other team has got to be Florida State. I mean, we were kind of kidding, like Tommy Castellanos, what is this guy doing? What's he thinking? Calling out Alabama. You don't want to ever do that against Alabama. I don't know what's a bigger story, how good Florida State looked or how terrible Alabama looked. It's a toss-up. I'm anxious to see what Alabama does with Kalen DeBoer. He's a great coach. He's got some good players. But to me, it was more about energy, a lack of effort, not necessarily just execution. It's like, where's the speed on this team? I know they have Ryan Williams, but they just didn't look like a team that had, I don't know if they had ankle weights on or what their deal was, but they look slow to me. So I don't know where they go from here. They got to get a lot better. But Florida State, going back to your theme, it's got to be a team you walk away with, along with Miami, that looks like, wow, those two teams, 1 week, but those two teams I thought made great statements.
Yeah, at Stanford, Steve and I do a pod late Saturday night, and we both mentioned that Florida State program is a proud program. They put the money into Doak, and they played with an energy that's reminiscent of the old days of Coach Bowden when they were in your face every single play and let you see it and hear it and feel it. They were tremendous. They start with a lightning bolt down there in Tallahassee.
No question, but they also seemingly had no business just embarrassing Alabama. And look at these numbers with Bill Belichick and Nick Saban. Saban not coaching, Belichick coaching. But during a 4-year period, recently, at least recently for me, between the 2017 season and the 2020 season, Bill Belichick won 2 Super Bowls with the New England Patriots, and Nick Saban won 2 national championships at Alabama. If you'd have said 5 years ago, who's the best coach ever in either sport, you would get no argument that it's Belichick in the NFL and Saban in college football. And Saban went out losing, I believe it was a semifinal 2 years ago to Washington and Michael Penix. He went out, kind of on top and saying, hey, this game isn't the same anymore. All the players want to know is how much money I'm going to pay him, and that's not what I got into this for. And he was in his 70s, and his place in history was well secure with all the national championships, even won one at LSU. So you could say that he, mic drop, best college coach of all time. Belichick goes out at New England with a mess. I mean, the last few seasons there without Tom Brady were not good at all. In his final season, they were terrible. They were almost as bad as Washington. And so he sits out for a year, does TV. He's pretty good at it, but, he wants to coach. So he's back in now. And Saban, who seems to be smarter, is smart enough to stay out and do television, which he's great at. Belichick really never was. And then Belichick is still chasing something, but at least for one night, it was embarrassing. Again, 511 games as either a head coach or a coordinator in the NFL, never giving up 48 points in a game. First college game he ever coaches, a home game against an unranked team, and he gives up 48. That is not good. Coming up, little nostalgia here. Mark Mulvoy used to be the editor at Sports Illustrated when Sports Illustrated was Sports Illustrated. And he showed up on Maury Povich's podcast and gave some real insight into what Sports Illustrated was back in the day and perhaps why it won't be that way ever again. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Maybe the more amazing thing about Sports Illustrated is the magazine actually exists rather than not exists. I guess there still are a handful of magazines out there. I see People magazine when I go to the grocery store, and Us magazine, maybe a couple of others. I don't know how well they do anymore, but when I was growing up, Sports Illustrated was it. I mean, I would look forward to every Thursday when it would come in the mail and be sitting on the kitchen table. My mother brought the mail in, and I would go through most of the magazine in a day. I mean, it was great stuff. Not just the swimsuit issue, okay? Yeah, no, they wrote great articles, great writers like Frank DeFord, Gary Smith. I mean, they were the best of the best, and over time, magazines' influence changed. I think cable TV changed a lot. Like, we had a black and white TV. To see these gorgeous color photos of big games was incredible. That was amazing stuff. And, things run their course, understand that. But I don't know if we'll ever, capture what Sports Illustrated actually meant back in the day. And if you got a job writing at Sports Illustrated, you were really great at what you did. I got to know Peter King a little bit when we were both covering the Giants in the late 80s. I was working for WFAN, and he was working for Newsday. And Peter was kicking everybody's butt on the beat. Everybody respected him and saw how hard he worked. And he wound up at Sports Illustrated, and nobody said, boy, that guy doesn't deserve it. He was deserving. He wound up having a great career there and at NBC and retired a year or so ago. But he really took pro football writing to a different level. And he was hired by Mark Mulvoy. Mark Mulvoy, for many years, was the editor of Sports Illustrated. He got the job at a young age. He was 43 years old. And he is a very good friend of Maury Povich. They play golf together all the time. And Maury has given up the TV show, or they gave up him. It doesn't exist anymore, the TV show that was based on paternity tests. Maury made a lot of money doing that, but I don't think he's necessarily as proud of that work as some of his other work, like when he was the host of Panorama here for a long time, and he did TV news in Chicago and also on Channel 5, and is the son of the legendary Shirley Povich. Anyway, he has Mark Mulvoy on his podcast, On Par with Maury Povich, and they got to talking about the glory days of Sports Illustrated when Mulvoy was the editor back in the 1980s.
The whole point I wanted the magazine to be, and turned it into, at that time, sports was a different place. Somebody had to be the conscience of sports. The television networks had all sold out to the leagues, to the colleges. They were all in bed with everybody, so never was read or heard a discouraging word. There were great stories to be done. So when I got the job, we ended up doing the whole Pete Rose thing. Baseball, Faye Vincent would tell you they learned more from us than they ever learned from their own research. We did the cocaine menaces that pervaded professional sports at that time, all the academic abuses in the college, and those alphabet organizations, the NCAA, the IOC, the USOC, and the soccer people, they were as crooked as you can imagine, and nobody was paying attention. They were giving them billions of dollars for television rights, so they weren't doing the type of reporting and reportage. The Washington Post did so well with Watergate, and so that to me was. Our mission was really to be the conscience of sport, and that was all rewarded. Mind you, I had a great pool of writers and reporters. And
I was going to say, you had Jenkins, you had Rush, you had Kirkpatrick.
Had all the great, had Frank the Ford was there, Armin Katayan, the great reporter. I hired Rick Riley, I hired Tommy Verducci, I hired Peter King. We had the greatest of all staffs, as you could imagine.
One of the reasons why the people at Time did not mess with you was that you came up with this idea, wait a minute, if we had that swimsuit issue, why don't we make this an annual? Why would we just have it once? And you quadrupled the profits for the magazine, which meant that Time could give it what you did.
Well, the great thing about being the editor of Sports Illustrated is we worked a different week. We worked Thursday to Monday. When the weekends, all the other people were off at the Hamptons somewhere or skiing. They didn't bother us. They didn't know what the hell we were doing. And we just did it. When I did Sid Finch, which is still the greatest April Fool's joke.
April Fool's. Oh my gosh! When you did that, maybe you ought to tell everybody how that came about.
When you're the editor of a magazine, you know every issue date. I woke up early in January. I was looking over the year. I said, "Oh my God, April 1st is April Fool's Day, and it's a publication date." So I went in the next day and I said to Myra Gelban, who was my outside editor, I said, "Get George in here and let's come up with an idea."
This is George Plimpton.
George Plimpton, fabulous writer, fabulous human being. God rest his soul. And it took about a month, but we came up with an idea and sent George off. And George came back and said, "Here's what I'd like to do." Once George had an idea, you said, "Go," and you get out of the way. And he invented this baseball pitcher, Sid Arthur Finch, from the Himalayas somewhere, threw the ball 162 miles an hour. And I ran a 12-page story on April Fool's Day. We had all the New York papers running around in St. Petersburg trying to find it, and nobody could find it. And of course, 2 days later, we fessed up. But I'll never forget Peter Jennings on Monday night on ABC said, "Folks, we always like to do something to have fun with you, our readers, and April Fools. But what Sports Illustrated did this week, nobody will ever match." He gave us about 11 minutes of national television on the case of Sid Finch. But the great thing about it, nobody knew about it. When when they found out what it was, some people in Time Inc., including the publisher, were furious at me. Of course, within about 48 hours, the word had changed. The world loved it. They understood it. George Vesey wrote a column in the Times saying, "Thank God someone's having some fun," and it all turned around.
That was fun. Yeah, and Plimpton was famous for immersing himself in this story. Probably his most famous thing was Paper Lion, where he went to training camp with the Detroit Lions as this quarterback from Harvard. He went to Harvard, but he didn't play football. And the idea was he was going to play in an exhibition game, which he did. And they made a movie about that. And Alex Karras and John Gordy, some of the actual Lions, are in the movie. And he did that with other things. He pitched against All-Stars. He wanted to see what it was like to be part of the story. This was different. The Sid Finch story, which was a spoof. It was an April Fool's spoof. The magazine was coming out on April 1st, and he had pictures of this, supposed phenom who wore a combat boot on one foot and had another foot that was bare. I mean, it was completely farcical, but funny. And, it's funny how that's what's remembered a lot about George Plimpton. He wrote a lot of other great things, not all sports. But yes, he was a tremendous writer, and that really got a lot of attention. But what Mulvoy misses, like a lot of us do in all different forums, is actual journalism. I think what Don Van Natta and Seth Wickersham do for ESPN is great. There's just not a lot of that around, and in Sports Illustrated, the budgets for investigative journalism just aren't there. They aren't there at newspapers anymore. Like the Balco investigation that was done by the San Francisco Chronicle, they couldn't do that today. They don't have the budgets to do it. And this is Mulvoy with Maury Povich, kind of lamenting the fact that journalism has seemingly disappeared.
The bigger question, Maury, is journalism dead? And the journalism that your dad practiced, that you practiced when you were a newsman, that Connie practiced, that I think in my days at Sports Illustrated, it's dead. The internet has sort of killed off so much of it. And, just recently, like the NFL is now owning 10% of ESPN. The leagues all have partnerships with everybody.
So you don't think that ESPN will have a repertorial staff that will take on the league?
I don't believe that at all. I mean, there's something happened the other day. Spike Lee was doing a movie on Colin Kaepernick.
Right.
They scrapped it the other day.
Yeah.
Now,
you know what they said? You know what they said? There were some creative differences.
Creative differences, yeah. Who are the differences with? I mean, I'm not pointing fingers, but I think the day of doing that type of story, it's, in the old days, we spent Pete Rose. I had 2 or 3 people who spent months on the whole story. Today's economy doesn't permit some publication to commit that type of resources and that type of money to do the types of stories that we miss. It's a scary everywhere. Look what happened in the White House yesterday. I don't know whether you saw that press conference, but it was stacked with all of the president's particular favorites. There were about 6 Fox people. Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend was in there representing somebody, and they were asking about, climate change or everything. Well, the real journalists in the room wanted to know about what happened at the meetings. So this is what's happening everywhere. They're stacking it against honest journalism, which scares the hell out of me, and it's a sad commentary.
So, as I understand it, you left SI. By the way, you left in the 90s. I mean, you were still young, but you left. And the reason you gave was Sports Illustrated and maybe other publications weren't prepared for the internet.
That is totally true. There are 3. Well, first of all, I wanted to do 3 things. I wanted to play senior competitive golf like you were doing and having a lot of fun. I was going to teach, which I did up at Fairfield University for a couple of years. I was prohibited from going on boards, and I had 2 offers to go on very good corporate boards. I had a home in Florida in the winter. I wanted to live down there. But there was a meeting at Time Inc. when Don Logan, who ran Time Inc., they asked him about this new thing, the internet, and he said, "It reminds me of the black hole." Well, that sent a message within Time Inc. to all the publishing side people and the business people that if the boss is not interested, why should we be? That's why Time Inc. doesn't exist today, because all of the publications were years and years behind everybody else when it came time. But there was another thing that happened before that. Jerry Levin, back in the 80s, Bob Miller, the publisher of SI, and I, Bob presented the case that we could have bought the 24.5% of ESPN owned by Getty for about the bottom line of SI that year, give or take $100 million. Levin said no, he's going to put up a satellite for something. All I can tell you is it was bought by Hearst. I've been told that over the last 30 years, Hertz has made, they have made, give or take, $24 or $5 billion on that $100 million investment.
Yeah, there was a time when ESPN was struggling. Their future was somewhat in doubt. In fact, when we launched WFAN in July of 1987, guys like Bob Lee came in and did shows with us. Chris Berman used to do commentaries. They were looking for kind of a life raft if ESPN didn't make it. You know, they got off the ground in 1979. First decade was a little bit shaky. The game changer for them was when they got a package of NFL games on Thursday nights, I believe. I think they split it, as I remember, with TNT, or maybe the league just gave them half a season. But once they got in with the NFL, that's when ESPN really got on solid footing. And as what Mulvoy is saying there, prior to that, they're looking for investors. They're looking to Sports Illustrated, which at that time was a very big and stable business. And they wanted them to invest $100 million. And they went, nah, I don't think so. And now you're talking $24 billion, $25 billion 30 years later. Also, you may remember this. This was in the 90s. And decisions get made in rooms where people really don't understand the business. And this is when ESPN was just flying. They were making money hand over fist because you didn't have the streaming. So they were making money from the cable service. They were the most expensive single item on your cable bill, I think, at a time when, like, TNT was the second most expensive at $1 a month. $10 of your cable bill was for ESPN, and everybody, even non-sports fans, had to get that. And then they were selling advertising. So it was the heyday for ESPN. And so SI looked at it and said, television. So they tried to launch their own sort of news network. And it didn't work. It didn't work because you weren't the place to go. People knew if you wanted to watch SportsCenter, you went to SportsCenter. You didn't go to Sports Illustrated to watch what was going on in the world, and it failed. And had they done what they should have done in the 80s, as Mulvoy says, invest $100 million, look at what they would have made. Last thing from the conversation was about Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan holds the record for most covers ever on Sports Illustrated, and deservedly so. He had made the magazine cover 35 times, but on the 35th, it came to an end. And this is the Mulvoy story about how a beautiful relationship between superstar athlete selling shoes, helped certainly by being on the cover of Sports Illustrated, how that ended, how the relationship came to an end.
34 of the covers were absolutely laudatory. Phil Knight loved them. Billy Smithberg, who ran Gatorade. Everybody, all his sponsors love him. Michael Liss, Michael Att, Sportsman of the Year. Honest journalism. Well, Michael went and played baseball, and he couldn't hit you or me. And he's playing in Birmingham. The best thing he did, I think, was drive the players around on bigger buses than the ones the team provided. Anyway, I knew that I had been told by a very reputable person that Jerry Reinsdorf was going to bring him up to Chicago one weekend, fill the ballpark in Chicago with 200,000 people, charge God knows what to see Michael go about 0 for 12. To me, I'm sorry, that's not part of the integrity of the game. And so I walked in one day and I said, I want to do a story on Michael, and here's the cover is going to be Baggett. And that's what it was. To me, you don't do that. That would be like all of a sudden this week in the World Golf Championship, in the thing they say, oh, Maury Povich is a good guy. He's a 5 handicap. He should come out and play too at 7,500 yards. Good luck. You shoot 90.
So, I mean, did Michael even attempt to talk to you?
No, Michael made it quite clear at the time that he had been finished talking with Sports Illustrated. And Jack McCallum, the great basketball writer, now if Jack were doing a story and asked a question like what day it is, Michael would probably say Tuesday, but there was no in-depth, conversation of any kind. And, he has that golf club down there. I went down there and played it once, but I'm not interested. That's 30 years ago, too.
So you haven't ever been in touch in the last 30 years?
No reason.
Well, nobody holds a grudge like Michael Jordan. He and Charles Barkley haven't talked in, 15 years, and all Barkley said was that Michael needed to stop listening to yes men in running his basketball team, which was bad. He was the owner of Charlotte for, I don't know, 10, 12 years, and he made a lot of money. He sold it for $3 billion, but they never won anything, and Barkley's point was correct. But what was a great friendship between Barkley and Jordan ended, and the only way it's going to possibly, be resolved is if Charles goes in on his hands and knees and apologizes. I don't think that's going to happen. But some interesting stuff from Mulvoy. I had not heard that story about Jerry Reinsdorf. That's very interesting. That in the year plus that he played baseball, I think it was only one full season. He was going to play another one, and then they had the lockout in baseball, and they were going to bring in scab players, and he didn't want to be a part of that, so he went back and played basketball. But the plan was for Reinsdorf to bring Jordan up before the end of the season, probably a September call-up. And, nobody's gone to Comiskey Park to see the White Sox, but, Jordan's playing baseball in Chicago? Are you kidding me? So I think that's where Mulvoy came up with the idea, oh, God, this is a farce, so let's just say, come on, stop this baseball stuff, which he did. And if there hadn't been a strike, it was a strike? Yeah, it was a strike because it was the 90-95 season. They had no World Series in 94. So the plan for the owners was, well, if the players are still striking, we're going to bring in scab players. Now, the Orioles didn't field the scab team because Peter Angelos made his money representing union people who were suing on asbestos damages. So they didn't have a team. A couple of managers who wouldn't do it. I think Sparky Anderson wouldn't do it. But that was the plan. And because Sonia Sotomayor, the judge in the district court in New York, ruled against the owners, we got baseball back. But by that time, Jordan was playing basketball again. So that's an interesting story. But Jerry Reinsdorf, who's owned the White Sox forever, also owns the Bulls, was going to use Michael Jordan as a drawing card for what would have been, and he's right, it would have been a farce to see Michael Jordan playing Major League Baseball. All right, coming up, Brian Daboll, news conference yesterday, coach of the Giants, getting ready for the opener. Some really interesting numbers on the quarterback that Washington will be facing on Sunday. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
I would guess that the Elias Sports Bureau could come up with this, but I would ask the question, has there ever been a team that has faced the same starting quarterback 3 straight seasons, and that starting quarterback has been with 3 different teams? Because that will be the case when Russell Wilson and the Giants open up against the Commanders on Sunday, 1 o'clock. Washington, a 6.5-point favorite. You may recall 2 years ago, it was the second game of the season, and actually they started off 2-0. And, with new ownership, you're thinking, maybe Ron Rivera can save his job. Of course, he couldn't. They were 2-0, and they won 4 games that year. But on September 17th of 2023, Washington played at Denver. They won the game 35-33. Remember this, that Russell Wilson hit a Hail Mary at the end of the game, and they were a very questionable pass interference away from tying the game with a 2-point conversion at the end and possibly taking that game to overtime. But the pass was broken up, and there was no penalty call, and Washington escaped with a 35-33 win. In that game, Russell Wilson, 18 of 32 for 308 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception, passer rating 107.3. Eventually, Russell Wilson was benched in Denver. Winds up in Pittsburgh last year as the backup quarterback at the end of the year, but by the time Washington faced him on November 10th here, he was in as the starting quarterback for the Steelers, and they won the game 28-27. Johnny Newton jumped off sides as Pittsburgh was attempting to run out the clock. He got taken in by a veteran quarterback, and the Steelers held on to win by 1. Wilson in that game, 14 of 28, 195 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, passing percentage passing rating 93.6. So I would look at it this way: he has played well against Washington the last 2 years. Is his team as good this year with the Giants? Probably not. Not as good as the Steelers were last year. And so, maybe that will be helpful, but they haven't exactly controlled him. Now, it was a different coaching staff 2 years ago. I get that, but he could be trouble for them. And the other thing about what's going on in New York is they drafted Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss, and he looked really good in the preseason. And the feeling seems to be that he will be the starting quarterback by the end of the year, much like what happened in Denver 2 years ago. But Brian Daboll is in a year where he's looking to save his job, and I'm certain that that's one of the big reasons that he's going with a veteran quarterback in Russell Wilson, a guy who maybe one day will be in the Hall of Fame, 2 Super Bowls, winning one with Seattle. But, when he gets to questions about quarterback, this is the way Brian Daboll goes.
I mean, our focus is solely on this week on Washington and their players and their schemes. And that's unique about the first game of the season. You don't know. You can study all the tape you want to study from the previous year, schematically. The players, that helps quite a bit, strengths and weaknesses. But, you don't know how they're going to play or what they're going to do different. They've had a whole offseason to prepare and study and look at the things that they think they can do well. So that's the first game of the season every year, is being able to adjust and do the things you need to in game. But no question, it's a good football team. They're well coached. They improved their scoring offense by 9 points, a little bit over 9 points a game from the season prior to that season, which is the biggest increase since 2020 of offensive teams. 6 come from back wins, coming from behind. Excellent special teams unit with 3 special teams aces in Reeves, Ballore, and Owens. And then a defense that is very opportunistic, that plays fast, and the way I know Coach Quinn likes to coach. So there's a reason why they were in that game. But again, our focus is on this year and doing the things we need to do to be as good as we can be.
And the last one for me is, what do you expect from Jaden Daniels? You were around, obviously, Josh, when he went from rookie to second year. We know you were fond of Jaden Daniels as a rookie. What do you expect from him here as he starts his second year?
Well, I just go off of the tape that I've watched. He's a dynamic football player. He's accurate. He's good under pressure. He's good in situations. He can bring his team from behind. He gives his players opportunities to make plays in the passing game, and he's unique in the running game, the way they utilize him. He's a tremendous football player. So I expect to see a tremendous football player.
Well, that's really going out on a limb there. But anyway, this will be a matchup of African-American quarterbacks. It'll be Russell Wilson for the Giants and, of course, Jaden Daniels for Washington. And this may not be meaningful to younger people, but to older people, this is staggering, at least to me. Of the starting quarterbacks who will begin week 1, half the league, 16 of the 32 teams will start African-American quarterbacks. And if you think of, at least for me, relatively recent history, I point out 2 players to you. One is Warren Moon. Warren Moon took, I think they won, I think they played Arkansas, Washington to the Rose Bowl championship at the end of the 1977 season. In 1977, the NFL had a 12-round draft. Okay, Warren Moon wanted to play in the NFL. 12 rounds. There were 28 teams in those days. They had 12 rounds. Not a single team said, Warren Moon took Washington to the Rose Bowl. Here were his numbers from his senior year at Washington. Let's see. He threw for 3,000 yards in his senior year, and ran for 339. He was an outstanding quarterback in college, and he was big, 6'3", 220 pounds. And not a single team said, we think Warren Moon can at least be worth a look. It's a 12-round draft. Mr. Irrelevant. Nope, nobody took him. So Warren Moon played 6 years in Canada, was a great player in Canada, won, I think, at least one, maybe 2 Grey Cups, was the MVP of the league. He winds up as a 27-year-old rookie with the Houston Oilers, and he made the Pro Bowl 9 times and was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I believe he's the only African-American quarterback that's in so far. And what's the deal? Don't they learn from something like this? Because, again, Warren Moon comes in 1986. 7 years later, 7 years later. Warren Moon has already become one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Houston's good. They're in the playoffs. Very famously, they had that 35-3 lead against Buffalo in the playoffs, and Buffalo came back to win. Well, that's not on Warren Moon. I mean, he was a great player. So 1993, Charlie Ward wins the Heisman Trophy and the national championship at Florida State. He was terrific that year. He didn't turn the ball over. Also, only 4 interceptions in his senior year. And Charlie Ward said to NFL teams, he said, if you don't draft me in the first round, I'm going to play basketball. Now, basketball was a secondary sport for him at Florida State. Understand that. He's joining the team late after the season is over, especially in a year where they go for the national championship. So he's joining the team about halfway through. But his career basketball numbers were 8 points and 4.4 assists a game. Those are not NBA numbers. But the New York Knicks took him. He played 11 years in the NBA, and he was good. He was a journeyman player. But you think of the what-ifs on both of those players. What if Warren Moon comes into the league as a rookie in 1978, gets a fair opportunity, and some very prime years of his career, you know, those years that he was in Canada, those 6 years are helping him in his development, and he may even emerge as one of the great quarterbacks early on, never gets the opportunity to do that until he proves himself in Canada. 6 years in Canada before he gets in the NFL. Charlie Ward, never got to look at him. And Charlie Ward was not small. He was 6'2", 190 pounds. And if you think of Charlie Ward coming out today, he probably goes number one, right? I mean, numbers like that and a Heisman Trophy and a national championship. He also could punt, and he was a great basketball player too, so he's a hell of an athlete. And, you know, certainly smart enough to play the position. I think that was a ridiculous knock that was against black quarterbacks. So 1993 is what, 32 years ago? In 32 years, we've gone from maybe the best quarterback that Florida State has ever had, one of the great college quarterbacks of all time who won a Heisman Trophy, going undrafted because nobody even said, well, I know he said he would only, you know, he'd only play football if he went in the first round. But, and again, 1993, I think that they had 8 rounds then. That was the first year of 8 rounds. Nobody even said, yeah, we'll take a flyer in the 8th round if he changes his mind. Like kind of like the Cowboys taking Herschel Walker in the 5th round when he's playing in the USFL. Oh, USFL folds, we get Herschel Walker. Nobody did that with Charlie Ward. And Charlie Ward never took a snap in football. Probably made more money playing basketball. You know, basketball money is different. But the thought that he could have been an outstanding quarterback, maybe even a Hall of Fame quarterback, and didn't play because he was black, and now, 32 years later, half the league has black starting quarterbacks. Pretty amazing numbers. Okay, coming up, we'll get to more on football, including an analysis of the Commanders from Pro Football Focus, some of the numbers that make them a team that, of course, is expected to be in the playoffs. But wait till you hear the over-under on win total. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. I'm not sure if it was my former partner, Steve Zabin, who coined this term, but he was the first that I heard say it. The 2000 Washington Redskins, the Fortune 500 Redskins, cost a fortune, finished 500. That was Dan Snyder's first go-for-it year as owner, and he went for it. Deion Sanders, Bruce Smith, Jeff George, come on down. Let's win ourselves a Super Bowl. They started 6-2. They finished 8-8. The coach got fired. Dan realized, maybe this doesn't work well this way. I'm going to hire Marty Schottenheimer, and off we were on this odyssey of disgrace over that 24-year period that Dan Snyder owned the team. But the hype for that season was amazing, and I remember being very, very close to it in 2000. As now we have great hype for this season, but in a much different way, with a real structure, a real team, a real ownership group, a general manager, a coach, all that stuff, and a generational quarterback, they hope. But in 2000, remember this, Dan Snyder took over as owner of the Redskins in May of 1999. So we'd already had free agency. We'd already had the draft. There wasn't much he could do. He did manage to force Charlie Casserly out by telling Casserly that he had to report to Vinny Serrato, and Charlie wasn't doing that. So Charlie was out the door like a week before training camp, which was really bizarre. But okay, off and running. That was year one, and then year two. And they were successful in Snyder's first year because he couldn't mess it up. So they finished 10-6, and they won the division. And they actually won a playoff game before losing to Tampa, and that was a crushing ending too. They had a chance to win the game with a field goal, and it was a bad snap, and it ended that way. But in 2000, he had cap room. Charlie had taken care of that, and he looked at the free agent market and saw names that he recognized from SportsCenter. Ooh, Dion's a free agent. Bruce Smith is a free agent. And he was mesmerized by Jeff George because of his arm. And, Dan Snyder had cozied up to Sonny Jurgensen. And Sonny really liked his arm. And he did. I mean, he had an amazing arm, but he had a 10-cent head, and that's why he was available. So, anyway, they went for it, and they signed all these guys. And in 2000, it just didn't work out. But the training camp hype, and I was doing shows out there with Zabe just about every day, was amazing. And they're bringing players over to us and say, it's like Woodstock. It's happening. We're going to win. We're going to win this year. And initially they did, and then they didn't. They had a variety of kickers, which cost them, some games. They had 5 different kickers that year. I mean, it was crazy. But I also, I was working with Mel Kiper on the weekends, and we had Brian Billick in the studio. I think it was Billick's first year. And Billick was talking to us off the air, and he goes, yeah, what's happening in Washington, that could turn out to be a disaster. That's not exactly the words he used, but it was to that effect. He turned out to be right. I don't think this is going to be a disaster this year, but the hype for this season is as close to 2000 that I can remember. I don't think there's been a season since 2000 where there's been this much excitement for what this team could possibly do and take the next step and maybe go to the Super Bowl. Anyway, at Pro Football Focus, which is headed up by Chris Collinsworth, they do a lot with numbers. They're numbers people, and 2 of their big numbers guys are Trevor Sikkema and Dalton Wasserman. They break down the numbers and try and figure out, what your team can do. They're big with analytics and all that. So after looking at all the numbers and all the analytics for the Commanders this season, this is the win total or the over-under for wins that they came up with for Washington.
We're at 9.3 here for the Washington Commanders. Now, they won 12 games last year. So people might look at this and they say, whoa, hold on. Why wouldn't you project them to be better? It's another year in the system. Well, you got to understand, projections and simulations, we're running a lot of different stuff. And a lot of times when you are we know that in the NFL, there are teams that are going to win 11, 12, 13 games, but it's really hard to get that in a simulation. That's more of obviously something that just, hey, the whole year's going really well for you. You're staying really healthy. You're playing well. You're also getting a little bit lucky. So when people see these, I remember reading the comments for Seahawks fans when we had them right around the 8 projected win total and they won 10 games last year. And you and I talked on the show about how much we liked Seattle this year and how well we think they could play as a team. And Seahawks fans were just like, yeah, but you're projecting them to have 8 wins. It's 2 less than last year. Projections are, you got to understand that projections are always going to be a little bit less than those total win totals that we have seen probably the year before. So 9.3 wins in a league that is very thin when it comes to margin for errors, that is a good projection for them. The best teams in the NFL are going to be somewhere between 9 to 10 wins when it comes to a win projection. And so what do you think about the Commanders this year? We saw the numbers there about sort of where they ranked offensively and defensively. Defensively, it was a young team that they were trying to make sure that they got the right pieces, still turning the roster over from the previous coaching staff. They struggled a little bit in that department, but I think it'll naturally be better this year. Ultimately, your thoughts on the Commanders, what we saw from them last year, and then what you think we'll see from them here in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Daniel's emergence and the run to the NFC title game makes you forget that they were the second worst team in football the year before, right? So they're still building this roster as they're going at certain positions. Obviously, the offensive line they've invested in again this offseason. The defense still isn't all the way where they want it to be. They've got some young players on that side of the ball, signed some free agents, especially on the defensive line. But you're talking about a team with an elite quarterback that won Rookie of the Year last year, had one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen, and now they're really starting to build around him. When you add a Pro Bowl left tackle like Laramie Tunsil, now they've signed Terry McLaurin finally to a 3-year extension. You add Deebo Samuel, who I think is a great fit in this offense. You've got an emerging young room of running backs, guys like Chris Rodriguez and your guy Bill Krosky-Merritt. I mean, there's just the right mix of young kids and veterans on this team. And last year, figuring things out in all those close games as a team that was playing together for the first time, now you really, especially offensively, have faith that they'll get even better in year 2 of it, as long as nothing happens to Daniels. Obviously, he's the center of it all with the arm and with his legs. He's one of the best dual threat quarterbacks we have in the league. So I just really think the optimism could not be greater for a team that already made the Final Four last year and now just needs to get over the hump of beating their division rival in Philadelphia.
Okay, so again, the number over-under is 9.3 for wins. That would be, if it's 9, would be 3 less than last year. But what they're saying is, depending on how things shake out, they could make the next step. They were a wild card team last year. They're playing all their games on the road. Could happen again. Could happen with fewer wins, but maybe a better team. And one of the things they like best about them, the strength of the team, is the skilled position players, obviously led by Jaden Daniels.
I mean, Terry McLaurin's obviously at least a top 15, if not top 12 receiver in the NFL, one of the best deep threats in the NFL, and his ability to win those one-on-one matchups outside, especially deep downfield, is huge. That's why it was so big for them to get this contract negotiation done with him, get him on the extension, get him on the field. I think Deebo Samuel really is a perfect complement to McLaurin. When you talk about what he still has left in the tank after the catch, this is a team that runs a high rate of screens. Jaden Daniels throws a lot of balls near the line of scrimmage, under that 10-yard mark. He's very efficient and accurate. I think Samuel's going to be able to take advantage of that, and he's not going to have to play running back at times like he did in San Francisco because the team's already got depth there. I think Cliff Kingsbury is going to find a ton of ways to use Deebo Samuel, and I'm looking at that 4th-round pick you mentioned, Jalen Lane. He can do similar things to Deebo Samuel. I'm telling you, he's going to be their punt returner this year. He can get in the slot. He can win after the catch. He's a really good separator who just didn't have the most accurate quarterbacks at Virginia Tech. I think he could be a real player for him. Zach Ertz is a reliable chain mover. You've got a pretty deep tight end room. You've got a deep running back room. Don't forget Austin Eckler, too, in a part-time role, who was good for them last year. He's not carrying the heaviest load like he did with the Chargers. In a rotational role, Austin Eckler is still a good player, but it all centers around Daniels as well. He opens up things in the run game for the running backs with the option threat that he is. He's so accurate and consistent as a passer. I mean, I like this unit. The individual players might not blow anybody away other than McLaurin, but I like this unit together in the way that Cliff Kingsbury has built it around Jaden Daniels.
And a lot of building a team has to do with getting really lucky. Lucky along with being shrewd in the draft. So Jalen Lane, 4th-round pick, if he becomes a top punt returner and eventually a deep threat as a wide receiver, Bill Ja'Cory Merritt, I think the most interesting of their draft picks. He was taken in the 7th round. Didn't play at all last year at Arizona because he'd run out of eligibility. Stayed with the program, working on the scout team. He said, well, I'm here anyway. Might as well, work at football. I can't play in the games. He was okay with that. Looked good at the combine. They took him, and he may turn out to be a terrific running back for them. So that's a lot of build. It's not all, the glitz and glamour of taking a guy at the top of the draft, like they did with Jaden. It's a lot different in building a team, and then you have to build depth. And if you build it with low-round draft picks, it's a cheap way to go, and that helps you quite a bit. As far as Daniels and what makes him so great, and this is so important. Keep in mind, we got a pretty early glimpse of Heath Shuler being a bust when he got his, I think it was his 2nd start. He started against Dallas, got his doors blown off. Then he was playing the Arizona Cardinals at home, a very beatable team. He threw 5 interceptions in his first game, 5. And he was kind of like, ugh. Jaden doesn't turn the ball over Here's more from Pro Football Focus with Dalton Wasserman and Trevor Sikkema.
1.5% turnover-worthy play rate last season. That is best in the NFL. He had a 90.6 in elite passing grade last season. People do. They talk about the spectacular with Jayden Daniels. They talk about those big vertical throws down the field. Certainly with Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors when he was at LSU, that's a lot of what we saw. It was a lot of 3 and 4 verts, a lot of slot fades, a lot of everything that allowed him to push the ball deep down the field. We know what he can do as a rusher as well. But I think prior to last year, and maybe still even a little bit now, Jayden doesn't get the respect that he deserves or the recognition he deserves for how smart he is with taking care of the football. And when you are in a vertical offense, a lot of times we will look at big-time throws and turnover-worthy plays and we'll say, okay, well, yeah, I mean, if the big-time throw rate is up, if you're pushing the ball deeper down the field, naturally, you're going to put the ball in harm's way a little bit more. That turnover-worthy play percentage can be a little bit higher. Normally, when you're talking about vertical offenses, that turnover-worthy play rate is probably somewhere between 2.5% to 4%, I think is realistic for those offenses that really like to push it. Jayden Daniels being sub 2% turnover-worthy play rate is a really great number from him. And I just think that it's a great stat to call out. Amongst all the great things that Jayden Daniels does from an explosive standpoint when it comes to really putting up points and pushing the ball down the field, it's how he took care of the football last year that was just as much of a reason of not only that elite passing grade, but them making it to the NFC Championship game.
And that's the reason that he's so hard to beat, right? He's so talented. He's so accurate. He can throw the deep ball well. I think, he even says this year that he's even stronger this year, and that part's going to look even better with his arm strength. He's an explosive runner who led all quarterbacks, I should say, in missed tackles for us, had a 90 rushing grade as well. And then you talk about a guy that doesn't beat himself, right? When you talk about you're getting under 2% with the turnover-worthy play rate, that's elite stuff. Lamar Jackson was in that range as well. Joe Burrow's in that range as well. So if you have a guy who doesn't beat himself and then makes all the explosive plays on the ground and through the air like Daniels does, you've got a shot to win every single week. And it's part of the reason they were in games against teams that, were on paper more talented than them. They were winning all those one-score games. He was leading them on fourth-quarter comebacks because he just doesn't beat himself. And he even very rarely misses throws. I mean, he's one of the most accurate quarterbacks in football already. So if he holds that, and he's held that since college, Trev, when he was drafted, he had the best turnover-worthy play rate for his career of any Power 4 quarterback in PFF college history. That goes back to 2014. He's just always been like this. The big-time throws and the vertical passing was in question. His rushing ability certainly wasn't, but I think this is the part that may have been missed throughout the entire process is he's never been prone to turnovers, and it feels like he's just not going to be in the NFL either.
98% of the time that he handles the ball, he doesn't turn it over. 2%, less than 2% turnover rate. And the Lamar numbers, or Lamar Jackson, he mentioned Lamar Jackson, 41 touchdowns, 4 interceptions last year. Now, what hurt Lamar, and this is going to be also key for Jayden as he moves along in his career, what do you do in the postseason? And Lamar did turn it over a couple of times in the loss to Buffalo, and that, probably played a big role. So you got to match what you do in the regular season, but that's the most important number, I think, for quarterbacks is that you hold on to the ball. And this is what Joe Witt, the defensive coordinator for Washington, is always talking about. We got to get more turnovers, and you got a quarterback who doesn't turn it over, so that helps. And, you go back to the highest scoring season they had. This is one of the most staggering numbers in NFL history. In the 1983 season, when they didn't win the Super Bowl, but they got back to the Super Bowl, the turnover margin was plus 43. And that's why they were so high scoring, because they were getting the ball in the other team's territory all the time. But if you don't turn it over and you force the other team to turn it over, you're going to win a lot of games. And that's something that they do have to work on defensively, is getting the ball. Joe Witt says it all the time. We got to take it away. And they weren't very effective doing that, or as effective as they should be. As for the defense this year, this is the look from Dalton Wasserman and Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus.
Defensive line, a little bit of a question mark, right? I mean, you paid Javon Kinlaw a lot of money. Certainly, you can understand the potential. That's why he was a first-round draft pick. But still, to this point, Javon Kinlaw has remained potential overproduction. So we'll see what he's like now with Dan Quinn in that defense. You've got Johnny Newton. You've got Deron Payne. Don't have John Allen anymore. You have Von Miller as well on the defensive side, Dorrance Armstrong along that defensive line too. But linebacker level, I think it's really key to talk about Bobby Wagner still being in this group, really solidifying things. I love the duo of him and Frankie Louvu. And then on the cornerback side of things, really like Trey Amos and what we've seen already. I was a big Trey Amos guy in last year's draft. He was a top 30 player for me. He's somebody that I really like the fit of him going to this defense as well, because I feel like he could be an outside starter for them, giving you a lot of flexibility with him and Marshawn Lattimore and sort of what you do with Mikey Samerstill. Let him be that inside out type of a playmaker that he was even last year, but you feel better about it with Trey Amos. That's a little bit of an overview. Where do you want to focus on, whether it's the rookie at the cornerback spot, the linebacker, and what Bobby Wagner is, or the defensive line? Where would you focus in most with the Commanders on that side of the ball?
I think the defensive line in certain matchups, and especially head-to-head against Philadelphia, is going to be my biggest concern, particularly in run defense, right? Yes, they signed Javon Kinlaw, but he's never been a great run defender. They signed Von Miller, but he's going to be a situational pass rusher. I think this defensive line is the one unit that could get him in trouble in certain matchups against these teams with good offensive lines, right? You talk about in the NFC, Philadelphia, the Rams, especially when they're running the football, the Lions, Minnesota, Green Bay. These are teams with really good offensive lines that you can't get overpowered in the trenches against, right? And then I think the cornerback spot's really key. Trey Amos, like you mentioned, the second-round pick, who probably could have been a first-round pick. He's been good on the outside so far in the preseason. Marshawn Lattimore, I think, is a huge key. They traded for this guy last season, and he was hurt when he got to him. They need him to be the number one type outside corner, or at least something close to it that we know he's been all these years in New Orleans, right? And the biggest thing about it, we've mentioned this a lot this summer, getting Mike Sainristil back in his natural position in the slot would be huge for this defense. Even in run defense, he's so aggressive. He's a great tackler. He's a smart football player. And last year, to his credit, he played well. He was their best corner last year, and he was playing outside where he didn't play a whole lot at Michigan either. So He's just a gamer and a guy with a high football IQ. If you get him back in the slot and Lattimore and Amos are good on the outside at corner, your pass defense gets a whole lot better really quickly.
So that's what we call the preseason preview. Pro Football Focus, Trevor Sikkema and Dalton Wasserman. And, a couple points that they made, which are key here, that the strength of this football team is at the skill positions, so that makes him really fun to watch. You got a quarterback who doesn't turn the ball over, and the question is, can the defense take another step up and with the additions that they made, be a better defensive team and maybe takes the ball away? But with all that, even though they may be a better football team this year, they may have a worse record. They may have, as they're predicting there, like 9 wins instead of 12, but once you get into the playoffs, once you get in the tournament, as they say, who knows? And that's what happened last year. They open against Tampa. They win that game with a doink field goal that goes in. They go to Detroit as big underdogs. Detroit was everybody's favorite to win the Super Bowl or go to the Super Bowl. They beat Detroit handily, getting turnovers in that game, which was big. And then, you run out against Philadelphia, which went on to win the Super Bowl. But, you never know what happens with injuries. You never know what happens, as your team develops during the course of the season. And, some of these older guys that hold up, like Bobby Wagner and Zach Ertz, you never know. You never know what's going to happen. Anyway, Bram is coming up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.